All right, so thank you everybody for coming to the application kickoff. This presentation is going to be a big picture presentation of what to think about in terms of application. We have a series of workshops and we'll break everything down into small steps. So this is just the start of our long process. We do have an additional 7 workshops coming up. And I am going to advance the slides here. Here we go. So just a little motivation for you guys. I know it seems daunting thinking about applying to medical and dental programs. We always like to put pictures of folks who have gone through this process before, and a lot of these folks were in your shoes just last year in this exact same place. And here they are now in their, well, I guess the folks who were in your shoes last year are now just getting acceptances. So 2 years ago, they were in your shoes, and now they're in their white coats, starting in medical programs. So this is something that seems daunting. It's a lot of steps, but it's also something that Northeastern students do, and it's something that's possible, something that's doable. It takes a lot of work and a lot of planning, but we're here to help you through every step of the process. So our goals for today, well, unfortunately, we're not going to learn from applicants about the process. Sorry, I should have deleted that. We're going to understand about how to pick the best year to apply. We're going to use data and reflection for self-assessment. We're going to realize that gap years are typical, figure out about what kind of letters you need, discover the value of applying early, and find out all the ways that you can get help. So every year we do a survey of our students who have just applied, and this is just some data from our past applicant survey. So for folks who are watching this, what past applicants have said that their greatest strength has been research experience, their greatest weakness has been GPA and exam score, and the most valuable resource has been personal advising and workshops. And we point this out because on reflection, after looking back on the process, folks are saying, well, I was really glad I had that research experience. And they're saying, I was kind of regretful that I didn't have a stronger GPA. I was kind of regretful that I didn't have a exam score that I was happy with when I applied. And they were also saying, we have this pre-health advising program. I'm really glad I used the personal advising. I'm glad I set up an advising appointment. I'm glad I went to the workshops. You guys are here at the workshop, so good job for doing that. Make sure to use the resources that are available to you. Make sure to think about what folks who have gone through the process before you have thought about and incorporate it into what you're doing, and learn from what others have said and what others have done. You guys are all scientists, so you really do want to use data in your planning process, in your application process, and make sure that you're making the best decision, because it is a stressful, expensive, and arduous process. So in order to help you with that, one of the things that we've done is we've created a database self-assessment, and we've included in that national data that will help you to consider, are you applying as the best applicant that you can be? Now, obviously, you can take 20 gap years, and each gap year you're going to be a little bit stronger because you're going to get more experience, and you're not going to do that probably, right? So at a certain point, you're going to reach a level where you feel like, okay, I'm a really strong applicant. And you have to figure out, where is that point for you where you're feeling like, I'm at the point where I'm a strong applicant and I'm each year is going to give me just a little bit more, but not enough to make a difference. Now, the self-assessment that we have, for folks of you who have looked at it, you'll note it's long, 17 pages long, which is very long. And it's long not because we like to torture you, but it's long because we really want to help you put together a thorough self-assessment and think about all of the different things that the schools are going to be thinking about. Now, since it's that long, I would like to point out you could throw it together that night, the night before, but you wouldn't want to because you like to plan ahead. You want to save time, money, and stress. So you don't want to apply if you're not ready to, if you're going to be a better applicant in a year. You want to get a great committee letter, and I can't stress how much we use the information that you give us in the self-assessments. People often ask, what can I do to get a good committee letter? And one of the things that you can do is tell us about yourself, right? Because all we can write about is what we know. And one of the ways that you can tell us about yourself is by filling out your self-assessment and filling out your medical applicant portal so that we know things about you. We'll also do an in-person committee letter interview. At a committee letter interview, that's a really great time to exchange information. You don't get to choose, you don't get to sit down and think about everything before the committee letter interview. I mean, you do. I hope you're sitting down and thinking about things. You don't know what we're going to ask. So this is your time to really think about, how do I want to present myself to the pre-health office for my letter? Spending time on your self-assessment and your MAP account is going to make writing the application less painful. And it's also going to help you with the interview because you will have already been thinking about who you are and why you want to be a physician for long enough that when you get to the interviews, you're going to be like, oh, I've been thinking about this for ages. I can tell you all of this information. Now, I want to point out to folks, and hopefully you guys, those folks who haven't taken the MCAT yet, registered for the exam today, because today is the first day to register for the MCAT. I want to point out to folks that this is due January 31st, the self-assessment. If you just signed up for a January MCAT, that is going to be in the end of January. You're going to be really sad if you're working on your self-assessment and studying for your MCAT. And you're going to be sad if you put the self-assessment off until after you take your MCAT exam. So if you signed up for a January MCAT, I would really recommend front loading that self-assessment. Work on it now, work on it in December. If you signed up for an April MCAT exam, and we'll talk about this next week at the applicant timeline, but everything in MAP is going to be due in April. And so I would really recommend start working on your MAP account now. Don't put it off to April when you're on that last push on your MCAT studying. For everybody, though, I would recommend downloading that self-assessment now and really looking at it. Start filling it out. You want to look at it now because it's October. You're not applying until June. And so if there's something that you're looking at the self-assessment and thinking, oh, I'm not feeling really confident about this, you have time now. You have almost a full year to address that so that you're ready by June. If you wait until January, you're just not going to have as much time to address anything that you feel you need to address. So we do have a fair amount of experience with the mistakes that people make when they're applying. And so here are the most common mistakes that we see people making. And these are mistakes that may prevent you from getting accepted. So one mistake is applying now when the data tells you to wait. And I know it can be really hard when you've had this plan and you've always wanted to apply this year, you've always wanted to go directly, you aren't quite sure maybe what you would do with a gap year. It feels like time is passing, you're, getting older, which, I'm old, so it's kind of funny when people say that to me. But you have this set up in your mind and you start thinking, well, waiting another year, that's not what I wanted to do. But if you look at the data and it tells you I should wait, you really need to seriously consider waiting, and really have some serious thought and conversation with myself, with Dr. Bagley, with your family, and think about what's going to be the best thing for you. Another really serious and one of the most common mistakes that we see people make is sitting for your admissions exam before you're fully prepared for it. So before you've successfully taken all the required courses, before you've studied intensively, which typically is 4 to 6 months, depending on how many hours in the day you're able to study for the test. People don't, they don't magically go up 4 to 6 points from a practice test on the test day. Tends to be that people do a little bit worse on the test day just because they're nervous and it's a stressful day. That's not always the case, but sometimes it is. And actually, it's not uncommon for that to happen. So you really, again, want to use that data. If you haven't been doing on the practice tests a few points higher than your goal score for the actual test, you really want to seriously consider pushing off your exam and moving it, even if that means you have to delay applying, because a bad test score is not going to help you. Taking an admissions exam twice in the same cycle can also really hurt you. And the reason it can hurt you, if you take your exam in March, you get your score in April, you're not happy with it, and you take it in May again, that's not enough time to study and address whatever happened and caused you to not do well on it the first time. So sometimes, yes, people have a bad test day. They didn't sleep the night before. They weren't ready to take it for some reason other than academic studying. Their car broke down on the way to the test. It was really stressful. I don't know, they weren't feeling well. They just had a bad passage. Something like that may have happened. But ordinarily, the reason that you don't do well on the test is because you need to study more. And if that's the case, you need to take the time to study more. We've had people who have taken the test in January, gotten their score in February, not been happy about it, and been able to take the time and study and retest in May. That may be an appropriate timeline for you. But if you take the test in March, it's not a good idea to think that you can retake it again in the same application cycle. And then applying late is definitely a big mistake. And remember, your application is not complete until your primary application is done and your secondaries are submitted. And we'll talk more about the timeline in our next workshop, which will be next week. But for most MD programs, at least, the secondaries will come in the beginning of June, or I'm sorry, the beginning of July. So really, June and July, you want to have some pretty extensive time set aside for writing secondaries and for filling out that information. Now, you guys have probably seen this data. Most medical students have taken one or more gap years. Most Northeastern students do too. You can see that this is last year's data. Only about a quarter of Northeastern students applied to go directly to medical school. Now, if you look at your self-assessment, if you're a junior now and you're planning to apply in June after your junior year, and you look at your self-assessment and your grades are in the right place, your admission score is in the right place, you have your clinical experience, research experience if it's necessary, if you're thinking about medical school. You have community service, you feel like you have strong letters. If you feel like, you know what, I've been working really hard, I've been really dedicated to this goal, I feel confident, given the data, that I am in a good place to go directly and to apply directly, that's great. A quarter of our students do that, and those students are just as successful as the folks who take gap years. So we're not saying don't take a gap year. We're saying if you take a gap year, that's fine. What you should be doing is making the best choice for you. It's nice. You have the decision, you have the choice to make, you have the options. So if you're somebody who looks at the data and you're like, you know what, I think I'm good to go and this is what I want, good. But don't feel like you have to be in that position. Okay, so excuse me, one of the things that the pre-health office works with you on is letters of recommendation. And by now, hopefully, most of you have talked to me and we've talked about committee letters. So, a committee letter requires that you meet certain deadlines and requirements. So you need 3 faculty letters, 2 science faculty, a third your choice. You need a clinical letter. You have the option for 2 additional letters. You also must meet every deadline that we have, and those deadlines are listed in the applicant agreement that you can get to through your medical applicant portal account. And you must meet all our requirements that are listed on that applicant agreement. If you miss a deadline, you can still qualify for a letter packet from us. A letter packet contains the same required letters as a committee letter. However, we do not write a letter. So we don't have the same deadlines because we don't have to write a letter for you. We package up the letters, the 3 faculty letters, the clinical letter, the 2 optional letters with a cover sheet from us, and we send that to the school. And then some people decide to apply with individual letters that are not sent through us. The individual letter option is typically taken by students in particular circumstances. Alumni who graduated more than 3 years ago may decide, you know what, a committee letter is not the best way to package who I am anymore because I don't want 3 individual letters. That doesn't necessarily, or 3 faculty letters and 3 external letters. That doesn't necessarily make sense anymore. I want 2 faculty letters and 4 external letters because my work is a bigger part of who I am. We require the faculty letters to come from Northeastern faculty. So for some people who are transfer students, it doesn't make a lot of sense to get a committee letter because you may have faculty from a couple different programs. Yeah, and then for people who are applying to optometry and veterinary schools, those programs don't require committee letters. It's important to note that incomplete letter collections will not be sent. So if you can't get all of the required letters, please don't request any. We won't be able to send them in for you. Letters won't be forwarded to any other programs besides the one they were intended. We don't send them, for example, to post-bac programs. Letter writers entrust those letters to us for a specific purpose. So they're sent to us for 4-year doctoral programs. We don't then get to decide what else your letter writer recommends you for. Only your letter writer can make that decision. So you would have to go back to your letter writer if you decide to apply for another type of program. So is a committee letter for me? For most of you guys, the answer is going to be yes. If you're applying to dental, DO, MD, or podiatry schools, if you're a current student or a recent alumni, usually recent alumni up to about 3 years out, you'll note that we have done committee letters for folks who are a little bit more than 3 years out, and those are usually people who have been working with us for a while. And typically it's somebody who got like a really good job and wasn't ready to leave it, but had been working with us. If you answered yes to questions 1 and 2, then you do want a committee letter. If you don't have a committee letter, if you apply with a letter packet or individual letter, schools will actually email you and ask you, why don't you have a committee letter? And I missed a deadline is not necessarily the answer that you want to be giving them. So it's really important that you do write down those deadlines and pay attention to them and meet them. Optometry and veterinary schools don't really want committee letters. They just want individual letters. So you're not required to get those letters, to get a committee letter. You are definitely still welcome to use our services, and we are happy to talk to you, read personal statements, talk about application strategy, all of the other services that we provide. Confused about letters? No worries. We recommend there are directions on the website. On the applicant agreement, it talks about the letter deadlines and requirements, and you can get to that through your MAP account. You'll find a link on your MAP account to the applicant agreement. You don't actually have to upload the applicant agreement. It will take you to our Google Docs. You'll fill that out. And then that's all that you need to do. Do make sure that you note all of the deadlines and requirements. This is not stereo directions. Don't just be like, okay, yeah, I agree, I agree, I agree. Write everything down before you click that you agree to everything. And then we'll also have an individual letters workshop, and that will be in December. At that workshop, we will talk about how to ask for letters, who you should be asking for letters from, the whole letter process. We'll go over the committee letter process. If you have questions sooner, though, you can definitely feel free to talk to me, set up an appointment. So hopefully all of you have seen this beautiful diagram that shows applicant timing, and this is last year's MD acceptances by month applied. You can see that June is really the month to apply. Now, when you look at last year's acceptances by month applied, you can see that Northeastern students have been really good about applying in June. So we're really pleased about how well you guys have been doing with that. It's really a very good idea to submit that application in June. It's going to really help you in the entire process, number one, with acceptance, and number two, with stress management, because it gets you into the committees often earlier in the process. And so that can just help you to hear from people earlier and to feel just less anxious. If you're confused about what you need to do when, not to worry. We have a workshop for that. That's going to be next week. There are directions and detailed requirements on the website, and the applicant agreement does have information as well about our deadlines. The timeline workshop next week, what I'm going to do is talk about between now and when you matriculate in whatever it is, a year and almost 2 years from now, what things you need to think about. So things you need to think about for the committee letter, but also just the general things that you need to think about. So next week's workshop is going to be a lot of information, a lot of preparation, and just a lot of stuff to help you kind of think about, when am I going to be really busy? When am I going to need kind of a big chunk of money? What things do I need to be thinking about coming up? Feeling unsure about everything? Well, no worries. We definitely recommend downloading, completing your self-assessment, making an appointment. You can set up an appointment with me on your MyNEU. If you don't have access to that anymore, email me, let me know a little bit about the times that you're available. I'm here during the day. I do appointments from typically about 9 to 4. If you're working, I can do a Skype appointment with you or a phone appointment if you don't have Skype from work. Like I said, it's a good idea to download that self-assessment sooner rather than later. Applying to these programs is a complicated process. It's a long process. It's rigorous. So we are here to help you. This is a list of the workshops that we have, the information sessions that we have over the next year. And I will email you with all of this information. So I'll send you a copy of the slides here. Next week is the timeline. We'll have one about the MCAT. You'll see the next presentation is a new one, which we're very excited about. We have somebody from admissions at University of Chicago Pritzker coming to talk to you on Tuesday, November 7th. This is a really exciting opportunity. She's going to be in the Boston area for a conference and is coming in to talk about the program at Chicago. Chicago is a really wonderful school, very research-focused school. So I would definitely say, come to that presentation if you can. It's a good time to get some FaceTime and hear about a program. We also, that same week, have Dr. Newmeyer, who's the Dean of Admissions from Tufts Medical School. So he'll be there on Thursday, November 9th from 3 to 4. He was here last year. Even if you came last year to hear him, I would recommend coming again. So I think it's really exciting that we have two admissions folks coming in the same week. At first I was like, I don't know about that timing. But once I thought about it, I was like, actually, you know what? This is going to be really great for you guys because one of the things that you're going to be doing soon is you're going to be choosing your schools. And that can be a little bit tricky because you're not going to choose your schools just based on GPA, MCAT, and geography, right? You're going to want to base your decision on where you apply on a lot of different things. You want to be a good fit for the school that you attend, and that is not really based on, oh, what did I get on my MCAT score, right? That's going to be based on a whole host of different factors. The mission of the school, do you like the curriculum? Do you like the hospitals that they have? Do you like their philosophy on teaching? Do they have the research or service focus that you're looking for? Do they have residencies in the programs that you're kind of thinking, oh, I might want to go into this? Is there international program opportunities? So there's a wide variety of things that you want to be thinking about. Hearing directly from admissions folks helps you to understand, well, how does University of Chicago see their program? How do they present their program to you? How does Tufts see their program? How do they present their program to you? Because they're going to talk a little bit differently about their program. And once you hear an admissions person talk about their program, you can kind of be like, oh, okay, I see how these two schools are kind of similar, but I also see how they're different. And that gives me a sense of what am I attracted to? And once you sort of get that impression from two schools, you can start then extrapolating to all the other schools that you're considering because you're not going to want to apply to 40 schools. That would be crazy. You're going to want to choose a select group. For MD applicants, the national average number of schools is 15. We say a max of 20. For dental and DO applicants, it's actually less than that. And, podiatry schools, there aren't even, 20 schools. So, you're not going to be applying to every program out there. You have to select where you want to go. We'll also be talking about personal statements and how do you write that, letters of recommendation, choosing your schools. We have a panel of accepted students coming in March. In May, when the application becomes available, we'll go over the application and how do you fill it out. And then we'll have a workshop in August where we talk about interviews and what to expect during interviews. And then just in addition to that, the pre-health advising program resources, whether or not you decide to get a committee letter, even if you miss a deadline and don't qualify for a committee letter, you're still welcome to use all of our resources. So this is a list of the resources that we do offer for you guys. And we do hope that you come in and plan to use those. So I don't know if folks have questions. I muted your microphones, but if you do have questions, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box and I will read them out loud and I'll answer questions that folks have. So questions, anyone? Okay. BCMP GPA, can that include classes such as A&P, nutrition, sociology, and psychology? So your biology, chemistry, math, and physics GPA will include any class that is listed as being in the biology department, chemistry department, math department, and physics department. When you fill out your application, you will categorize the classes as biology, chemistry, math, or physics, or you'll put them in some other categories such as social science, humanities, English, language, etc. If a class is listed as for example, a psychology class, but it's like cognition, which is really, really biology heavy, you can say this is a biology class, or anatomy and physiology. Maybe it's taught through the exercise science department, but you're like, this is really a biology class. You can categorize those classes as biology or chemistry, whatever they are. Somebody at the application service will look at your application and do what's called a verification process. And if they look at your classifications and say, no, that's not what you put it in as, they can change it back. So, for example, sociology, they may say, sociology, that's a social science, it's not a biology. So they may change it back. At a certain point, if it's just a couple things that they're like, I don't think so, that's not a biology, they'll just change it. At a certain point, I think it's like 10 classes. If there are too many things that they don't agree with, they're going to send it back to you and say, okay, do this right. Most people, they do change some things on their applications just because it is confusing to put it together. So you'll classify things as best as you can. Other questions? Difference between cumulative and all other. Cumulative is your overall GPA, then you have science GPA, and then you have all other GPA. So all other is things that aren't the science GPA, and the cumulative is everything. Other questions? Will commit. Oh, this is a good question. Will letters be ready when the applications opens in June? No, we do not write committee letters until after you apply. Actually, we want a copy of your submitted application, and so we will look at your application when we write your committee letter. Although you submit your application in June, the schools don't get the applications until the end of June. So we try and get your letters written by the end of June. Um, so yeah, it is for us, June is a month that we spend frantically writing letters. We want to put our time and energy into writing letters for folks who apply. And until you hit that submit button, and you have an MCAT score, we don't know that you're applying. So we're not going to write your letter until you have your MCAT or DAT or well, it's pretty much MCAT or DAT score. Until you know you're applying, we're not going to write your letter. So we have a queue and we go through the queue pretty much in the order that you apply. We are pretty good about getting those letters in as fast as possible because we want you to have your application in as soon as possible to be a good applicant. Anyone else with questions? Any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I look forward to seeing you next week for the timeline meeting. And, over the next year, I look forward to working everyone as they prepare and apply. So I will see you soon. And definitely, if you have individual questions, feel free to send me an email or to set up an appointment.